Hello and welcome back to the Growth Minded Leadership Framework. This video is about the mirror reflection exercise. So what do we mean by the mirror reflection? When you turn up for work every day, sometimes people give you feedback, make a comment, make a remark about the work that you do. Sometimes that lands and sinks in and you think, oh yes, maybe I am, a good listener. Maybe I do build strong relationships. But there are times where you may dismiss that feedback as being lucky, or you just dismiss it out of hand, or that everybody does that, don't they? It's one of those situations where you may feel it's nothing special. It's part of what everyone does that in this role when they turn up for work. So, in my own example, for about 4 years, had a partner who I delivered projects for come up to me and say, Wayne, you're very good at turning these teams from being dysfunctional into high performing. And then I would say, I'm lucky because I had John and Tarina and others on the project. And then about 6 months later, he'd say the same thing and again and again. And so this repeat of this feedback made me at one point stop and think about, if I'm doing this in a way where it's all subconscious, how can I structurally put it in place so that I can be certain that I'm going to be building a high-performing team in the future? So I sat on my sofa, I wrote down what I thought I did, and I built this as a set of presentations that at first was a presentation called Inspirational Project Management, and I delivered that tens and tens of times to large groups of people, over 200 people in some instances, as an education event. And then it's now become part of how do you build a high-performing team plenary session that I now stand on stage and give as well. So it's gone from something that I would say was not centered as a leadership quality, and it took 4 years for me to bring that into the center. And then it's now, I would say, and considered to be one of my strongest vertebrae within my portfolio, let's say. So that's what this whole exercise is. And the best way of really thinking about this is just capture what you're hearing. Because we want to capture what you're hearing. What feedback are you receiving from others? When have you been given this feedback? And do you tend to hear this from multiple sources and multiple times? And what was your response? Did you dismiss it? I put it down to luck. I thought everyone does that. It made me feel uncomfortable. I sort of partially believed it. Or no, I fully accept that feedback. It is something I do. I'm going to capture it anyway because it's another story element that I can start to build into my overall framework picture of who I am. One thing that you may be able to then do is start to make some notes around how did it really make you feel? What was your response to that? And do you own it fully yet or not? Because if you click on this, it means you've centered it. If you don't, it means you've got some work to do. And therefore, what work can you do in order to bring that into the center, to believe it more, to believe it's quite unique, not unique to you, but it's a special quality that you should be calling out as something that you bring to work with you every day. And then, what are you going to do to try and center that particular mirror reflection? And what progress are you making against it? So it's a very simple exercise. Once you've got it captured and you've centered it, I would strongly recommend that you add it to your stories, because adding it to your stories means you can then start to add more content around this particular reflection. You can start to tag it to the leadership vertebrae. So this is just a way of initially capturing something that you may have missed that can become a story that supports the vertebrae models that we've already talked about in previous videos. So it's a very simple section of the framework, but one that I particularly found extremely useful during my career.